Knowing how to position elements on a page to build layouts is just as important as understanding the box model components. In this video, we'll learn all about positioning elements with the float and clear properties. The W3C defines a float as a box that is shifted to the left or right on the current line. Then it goes on to say that the most interesting characteristic of a float is that content may flow along its side. Content flows down the right side of a left floated box and down the left side of a right floated box. So, as we just read, floats are elements that are literally floated on the page so that they render side by side to each other. The float property accepts three values, left, right, and the default value is none. It's important to understand how floats work and behave, along with some of the issues that may occur when using them. So let's go over some common examples. One of the most common uses for the float property is for floating an image with text wrapping around it. So let's go ahead and do that. Here we have an image element with a sibling h4 and paragraph. Both are nested inside of this containing div. When we view it in the browser, we can see that because the paragraph and heading are block-level elements, each element is on its own line. To float the image, in our CSS, we'll create a new rule by selecting the image element. Then we'll add the float property with the value right. When we refresh the browser, we can see that the image is pushed to the right side of the containing div, and the surrounding paragraph and heading flow on its left side. If we change the value from right to left, we'll see that the image is pushed all the way to the left side and the content flows on the right side of the image. What floats do is they remove elements from the normal flow of the document. In the normal flow of our document, each element stacks on top of each other vertically, like we saw earlier before we added the float. To better illustrate this, let's go ahead and add a border to the paragraph and heading. So I'll just apply a 3-pixel border here of black to our paragraph and one to our heading 4. Back in our browser, notice how the floated image appears to be inside of the paragraph and headings box. So this is what I meant when I said that floats remove elements from the normal document flow. If we try to apply space around our image by applying a margin or padding to the paragraph, so let's go ahead and apply 25 pixels to the left and right sides of the paragraph. And when we refresh, we can see that it doesn't quite give us the results we need. Well, that's because of the way the box model works with floated elements. Remember that the image isn't really nested in the paragraph, so any margins or paddings applied to the paragraph will create space between the paragraph and the containing element, as we can see here. In order to create the space we need, we'll need to apply a margin or padding to the image itself. So let's go ahead and remove the 25 pixels and the paragraph, and we'll apply a margin of 0 and 25 pixels to the left and right sides of the image. When we refresh the browser, we can now see the margins we need around the image. So I'll go ahead and remove these borders because we no longer need them in our example. Next, we don't want the text to wrap around the image as we see here. It would actually look better if the text was flush left and aligned with the heading. To make that happen, we'll need to apply a width to our paragraph. So in our CSS, we can go ahead and add the width property, and let's make that 500 pixels wide. When we refresh, we can see that the paragraph is narrower, but now there's more text wrapping the image. To get the result we're looking for, we'll also need to float the paragraph left. So now in the browser, we can see that that worked. The text is nicely aligned and flush with the heading. But now we're seeing a common issue that occurs when using floats. If a block element, like our containing div here, contains floated children, like our paragraph and our image, it will collapse to no height, requiring a fix. So here we can see that our div has collapsed and is only taking on the padding applied, as you can see here in our CSS, along with the margin and height of the H4 as its height. It doesn't expand to completely surround all the elements because the browser does not account for the height of the floated paragraph and image. In our CSS, if we also float our heading 4 left, we can see that the parent div no longer accounts for the H4, so it collapses further. What we need to do is use the clear property to force the div to contain all the elements. The clear property clears the space around the floats. Clears and floats sort of complement each other, actually, and there are several float clearing methods we can use. The first way we can clear floats is by adding an element to our markup, then clearing it in the CSS. For example, in our HTML, right before the closing div tag, we'll add a BR tag. Then, in our CSS, we'll create a new rule by selecting the BR elements and apply a clear property. Clear accepts 4 values: left, right, both, and none. None is the default value, and it allows floating elements on both sides. The value left allows no floating elements on the left side. So when we refresh, we can see that this works for us because we're only floating our elements left. The value right allows no floating elements on the right side. Since we're not floating any elements right, nothing is cleared. With the both value, no floating elements are allowed on either the left or right sides. So if we have both left and right floated elements, the both value is the way to go. Although this method is effective, it does require us to add non-semantic elements to our markup. On a large site where you'll need many floats cleared, this may clutter the markup with non-semantic tags. So we'll go ahead and remove it. Another way to clear floats is by applying the overflow property to the containing element with a value of hidden or auto. So for our containing div, we'll go ahead and add the overflow property, and we'll use hidden as our value. This is a simple and effective way of clearing floats, but it isn't the most recommended because scroll bars may appear in certain browsers or certain parts might get cut off due to positioning or margins and padding. The best and most recommended method to clear floats is by using what is called a clear fix or micro clear fix. You can learn more about it on nicholasgallagher.com/micro clear fix hack. I'll go ahead and paste it in our CSS and go over how it works. So this method uses the before and after pseudo elements to generate empty content via the content property, as we can see in the empty string here. Then it styles the content by displaying it table. Table creates an anonymous table cell and a new block formatting context, which uses the before pseudo element to prevent top margins from collapsing. The clear property is then used below on the after pseudo element to clear it on both sides. I've used group as the class name in our selector. Other common class names for this are clearfix or CF, but group seems to be the most semantic class name because we're using it to contain or group the elements within the parent. So now anytime we need a containing element cleared, we just need to add the class group to our element. To ensure consistency for IE 6 and 7, we'll need to add a rule below which uses the zoom property to trigger has layout. This fixes a rendering bug that happens in IE 7 and below. In this next video, we'll take a closer look at CSS positioning schemes that can be specified using the position property.